and welcome. My name is Evgeny Rusakov and you're watching TVP World interview from Vilnius. This month, Vilnius held a conference on the topic accountability for the crimes and human rights violations in Belarus. Who should take the responsibility for the crimes committed against Belarusian citizens? How should the tribunal look like? Shall we see perpetrators in the dock? To answer these questions and many more, we are joined today by the expert in public law, Ingrida Danėlienė. Hello, Ingrida, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
First of all, this conference that took part not so long ago, could you please shed more light on this? What was it about?
Well, indeed, Vilnius has become quite a platform for raising sensitive issues and sensitive questions that are topical in the world today, and especially and also with regard to Belarus and the responsibility for the Belarusian authoritarian regime for its crimes. The conference that was held just recently was already the second one, I think, on the topic. It's not just a scientific or academic event, but it should be commended that it's one of those events that has an effect on practical issues.
Practical issues. Let's talk about this, because during one of these events sessions, you discussed the overcoming barriers to universal jurisdiction and its legal and practical perspectives. So what are those perspectives?
Well, universal jurisdiction is a term that to a lawyer is very well known and very familiar, but to the eye of the society, to those non-lawyers, it can sound a bit mystical. What is universal jurisdiction?
It is. Surely, yeah.
In very simple terms, it is the possibility to try crimes, certain crimes, not just any, but those that are severe, serious, such as crimes against humanity, to try those crimes irregardless of where the crimes were committed and by whom. In the Lithuanian example, the Lithuanian Criminal Code allows Lithuanian prosecutors, and not only allows but also obliges Lithuanian prosecutors and authorities to prosecute crimes even though they were not committed in Lithuania or by Lithuanian nationals. And like I say, not any crime, but such that are very grave, including crimes against humanity, which are exactly the crimes that are being committed by Lukashenko's regime. And it is a fact that they're being committed, even though not yet a proven one. What kind of crimes are we referring to? Here we concentrate on just some. For example, the unlawful restriction of one's freedom, meaning the unlawful detainment, the persecution, harassment, the inhumane behavior of the authorities against the people, the torture.
The same regime incommunicado. Am I right?
Yes, the torture. And also the forced deportation, which also comes under this term because the people that were forcefully made to leave Belarus due to the actions of the regime, they also are victims to the crime.
Like Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, for
Like
example.
Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, exactly. So in this case, Lithuania not only has the tools and the possibilities, but also has the obligation legally, if it comes to its knowledge, if it gathers enough evidence, if there's ground to persecute such crimes and those criminals behind it. So from the legal perspective, it is quite clear, and Lithuania is not the only one that has these tools. I mean, in different cases in different countries, the legal circumstances or requirements may be different. For example, in Poland, there's a need to have certain ties of the crime to Poland.
I see. So, but by the way, you've mentioned those gathering evidence. How hard is this?
From one perspective, for the Lithuanian authorities to gather evidence on crimes committed both in Belarus or, for example, in Ukraine, or in areas which are under war or under the rule of the regime, it is very difficult, and that is why they rely on the evidence or on the help in gathering evidence by those inside the country, by NGOs, by specialists, by people. And in this case, also, there are a lot of NGOs and lots of lawyers and specialists, both national, Belarusian and international, that assist in gathering evidence. And also the victims that bring the question to the authorities, they also bring with them information that leads to gathering evidence. And your biggest concern and question was what are the perspectives?
Exactly.
So from the legal point of view, it is just like any other crime. The criminal code, I think, gives a 6-month period to gather the evidence, which of course can be prolonged, but generally it should go as in other proceedings. When there's enough evidence to prove who is the perpetrator, what activity has been committed, what we call the subjective side, whether there was the intention, the will to commit the crime, it should be quite easy because all the legal processes are obvious. But in this case, Lithuania has a case opened, yes, for almost 4 years now. It's one single case, but there are numerous victims. From what I've heard, about 60 or something like that. Maybe I'm not precise. So there's numbers of crimes, numbers of victims. I know that there's a lot of evidence, and the prosecution acknowledges that there's a lot of evidence, but we're not yet at a point where the perpetrators have been named.
Okay. Looks like this might be the biggest problem in this case.
Yes, the prosecution's office, the general prosecutor's office, indicates a number of problems. Some they relate to, for example, they say that by naming the perpetrator will then have to learn all the information in the case, which might hurt the victim. The prosecution's office also says that it really struggles with finding the somewhat common understanding of the international community of prosecutors. So there are lots of issues that are related to this case, but mostly not purely legal issues, if I say so, but more...
When we're talking about the Alexander Lukashenko regime, and we try to use the term legal, I guess those are two different things. Okay, let's move on. So another session was about the special tribunal for crimes against humanity in Belarus. So how do lawyers see this tribunal? I mean, how hard would it be to organize such an event?
It is not an easy quest. Let me start by saying that there are when dealing with our region, there are discussions among, of course, the political society, legal society, about the need for special tribunals, first of all, not only for Lukashenko, but primarily for the atrocities in Ukraine, for the crimes being committed by Russia in Ukraine. And the first issue, in a way, also struggles with finding the support, the overall support. What is difficult in this case is that in order to have a special tribunal that would have the jurisdiction and would have the support of the international community, there is a need for an official, wide-ranging declaration of the support. What I mean is that a tribunal would have to, for example, be founded by, the United Nations, the General Assembly.
What are the obstacles then?
Well, from what we see and what we hear, there's a need for 2/3 of the majority of the General Assembly, and we're not yet at a point where this has been declared. But in Ukraine's case, the European Parliament has already issued its opinion and its support for the establishment of the special tribunal. And it has been supported by the Council of Europe's Parliamentary Assembly, and there's an office established in The Hague gathering evidence. So why am I talking about Ukraine now is that Lukashenko is also mentioned
there as a
in this background.
co-aggressor,
Yes.
co-aggressor's country. I
Yes,
see.
yes, because when we speak about Lukashenko's governments or the regime's responsibility, there are two main issues everywhere. It's the crimes committed by the regime against its own people in Belarus, but also the crimes that are related to the aggression of Russia against Ukraine. So yes, Lukashenko is under
Responsible
the radar.
for both.
Yes.
In fact.
Yes, yes. And therefore, the primary and the first issue is now to establish a tribunal that would persecute the crimes of Russia and the Russian leaders for their crimes committed in Ukraine. And I think, unfortunately, in the wake or in the context of the Ukrainian war, Russia's war against Ukraine, Lukashenko does not receive its due attention. And that is why conferences like this, discussions like this is our main goal, to bring these issues to the table.
The closing session's topic was about sanctions against the supporters of the Lukashenko regime. So what kind of sanctions are we talking about? Is this restrictions on travels, persecution in countries that agree to sanctions, monitoring their bank accounts and money flows? What are we talking about in this regards?
Well, when we talk about sanctions, and especially relating to Belarusian authorities, indeed, there are different types of sanctions. First of all, we have the so-called international sanctions, right? In the European context, those are the sanctions by the European Union. And then we also have the national sanctions by the democratic states. The national sanctions and the European sanctions, they complement each other. Sometimes they overlap, but many times the national sanctions can be more far-reaching because you need a smaller consensus, naturally. What are the types? As you mentioned, mostly the types on prohibitions on movement. These are quite hurtful and quite realistic sanctions because they apply to individuals and they reach their goal. The others are the financial sanctions. Those are on the assets, the freezing of assets, for example, right? And those they not only apply to individuals or private, let's say, companies or entities, but they also apply to state companies and entities, and like the Belavia, the airlines,
sure.
and also companies that contribute to the economy of the regime, and also, energy sector that deal with directly war or criminal activities. So those are sanctions. For example, if we talk about travel restrictions, we talk about hundreds. If we talk about the financial sanctions, the number is smaller. But I checked, and recently, for example, every anniversary of the unlawful presidential election, states they remember them with adding to the list, expanding the list a little bit of sanctions. The U.S. also.
Okay, so briefly, problems with sanctions. What are those?
I think what we hear every day from the press, that once there's a sanction introduced, there's also a way to overcome it. And also with regard to Belarus, that these are still insufficient because the number of companies they touch, the number of entities, and also the number of individuals, probably it's still insufficient. And when we talk about state leaders, another problem is that they have the state leader immunity. And there are no direct sanctions on Lukashenko. And the issues of the responsibility of Lukashenko, like Lukashenko and Putin, those would be resolved by a tribunal.
Well, Ingrida, people want justice, and I guess, well, let's hope they get justice one day.
Definitely, and hopefully sooner than later.
Thank you for joining us today and really hope to see you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I would like to remind our viewers that our guest for today was an expert in public law, Ingrida Danėlienė. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us.